Princess Virella of the Kale Imperium had grown up in a palace surrounded by marble walls, crystalline windows, and warriors in silver armor. From the day she was born, she had only known war. Her people had been fighting humans for more than 3 generations. The Kale believed themselves to be the greatest soldiers in the galaxy, blessed with strong bodies, long lives, and noble honor. They looked at humanity as a younger race, reckless and fragile, with short lives and a strange lack of respect for tradition. The war should have been quick and easy, but humans refused to lose. Every time the Kale Imperium pushed, the humans came back harder. Every time the Kale army won a major victory, humans rebuilt their fleet, trained new soldiers, and returned to the battlefield with stronger machines and more fire. By the time Virella reached adulthood, both sides were exhausted. Cities had been burned, colonies lost, and millions had died. Even the palace walls could not hide the fear in the voices of the royal council. They had weapons, soldiers, and powerful starships. But they no longer had time. If the war continued, neither side would survive. A final attempt at peace was suggested, and after many weeks of debate, negotiation, and tension, the 2 governments agreed to a bold solution: a diplomatic marriage. The idea shocked many Kalians. A royal princess, joined to a human? It felt unthinkable. But it was the only option with real hope. If the 2 nations were connected by marriage, perhaps the hatred of generations could finally end. Virella accepted the duty. She was raised to place her people above herself, and even though she had never seen peace in her life, she wanted it. But quietly, she feared the unknown. Humans were so different. They advanced quickly and learned fast, but they seemed chaotic and unpredictable. She had met human officers before, during rare diplomatic meetings. They spoke loudly, laughed easily, and never seemed afraid of anything. They were short-lived, but lived each year as if time were running out. Virella could not understand them, and she wondered how she would live with one as her husband. The man chosen for the marriage was Commander Alexander Hale of the Human Federation. He had served for many years in the war, leading battles that Kalian generals still remembered with bitterness. His reputation was not of brutality, but of persistence. Reports said that Hale did not believe in surrender. He fought until the mission was complete, until every soldier was safe, or until the enemy could no longer stand. Humans praised him as loyal, unbreakable, and intelligent. Virella's own father said he was the most dangerous type of soldier, one who fought with his mind before he fought with his weapon. The day Hale arrived at the capital of KL, the palace was filled with silent watchers. Some looked with curiosity, others with disappointment. Many older warriors could not accept the marriage. They saw Hale as a sign of weakness, a surrender of Kalian pride. Virella stood in the throne room, wearing ceremonial robes of red and gold, trying to appear calm. She expected a tall, loud, human officer, filled with arrogance. Instead, Hale walked in quietly. He was smaller than the average Kalian soldier, with dark hair and tired eyes. His uniform was simple, but perfectly kept. He moved with the calm precision of a man who understood discipline deeply. When he bowed to Virella and the king, his voice was steady and respectful. He showed no pride, no fear, and no attempt to impress the crowd. He behaved like someone who had stood in dangerous rooms many times before and knew that appearances meant nothing. Many Kalians in the hall whispered to each other. Was this truly the great human commander who had pushed back entire fleets? He did not look like a living legend. He looked like a tired man who had seen too much war and still carried the responsibility of protecting his people. Virella watched him closely. She had trained her whole life to judge soldiers. Hale did not move like an average man. His posture showed focus. His eyes missed nothing. Even though he did not speak boldly, he owned the room simply by being in it. And yet, He did not seem interested in impressing anyone. He was there for duty, not pride. The marriage ceremony took place quietly, without celebration. It was formal, respectful, and binding. When Hale took Virella's hand, his grip was steady and warm, not controlling. He looked directly into her eyes, and for a moment, Virella was surprised by what she saw. There was no resentment, no discomfort, no anger. He accepted the marriage fully, because he also wanted peace. She realized then that he was like her in one way, tired of watching young soldiers die. In the days that followed, Hale settled into the palace as diplomatic preparations continued. Instead of acting like a prince, he behaved like a soldier. He woke early, trained alone in the courtyard, and spoke with palace staff to learn Kalian customs. The servants were surprised by his sincerity. Instead of giving orders, he listened. He thanked them for their work, something few nobles ever did. He spent long hours reading imperial history, as if he believed that understanding Virella's people was as important as understanding his enemies in war. Virella noticed that he rarely smiled, but not because he was unfriendly. He simply carried the heavy weight of someone who had seen loss. She began to understand that humans measured strength differently. Kalians valued power, honor, combat skill, and noble lineage. Humans valued determination, adaptability, and the will to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. Both forms of strength had kept the war alive. Perhaps they could also build peace. While Hale earned respect from the palace staff, the nobles were not pleased. Several council members believed the Federation would take advantage of the marriage. They argued that humans could never be trusted, that Hale was a spy, or a weapon hidden in plain sight. They whispered behind closed doors, suspicious of every step he took. The royal court was filled with political tension. Peace existed only on paper, while doubt lived in every corridor. Virella watched all of this quietly. She was beginning to see the truth that few in the palace understood. Hale was not there to conquer. He was there to make sure no more lives were wasted. And if anyone threatened the fragile peace he now represented, he would not sit by and watch. Under his calm surface was something powerful and unshakable. What she did not know yet was how powerful he truly was. Very soon, the galaxy would see that the human she married was capable of far more than anyone believed. And when war came again, she would understand what humans meant when they said they fought for the things they loved, no matter the cost. In the first weeks after the marriage, Commander Alexander Hale became a silent mystery inside the palace. Kalians watched him closely, waiting for some sign of arrogance or disrespect that would confirm their fears. Instead, Hale walked the hallways with calm patience, like a man who had learned how to move through dangerous places without drawing attention. He spoke politely to every guard, every servant, every court official. Many found themselves unsure how to treat him. He was not a prince, but he was now married to a princess. He was not a Kalian warrior, but he carried himself like someone who had earned respect in battle. His quiet nature forced the palace to rethink what strength looked like. Princess Virella found herself observing him more than she expected. She saw him eating in the palace dining hall with simple meals, rather than the extravagant dishes the court offered. She noticed how he always took a moment to thank those who brought him reports, food, or information. Even the palace guards, known for their sharp discipline, began to treat him with subtle approval. He never ordered them around. But when he spoke, they sensed something in his voice that made them listen. It was not command, it was experience. Hale spent long hours studying Kalian military history. He requested access to the archives and spent quiet nights reading old battles fought centuries before humans first reached the stars. The archivists were confused. They had expected him to be proud of human victories or focused only on modern tactics. Instead, Hale examined defeat as carefully as victory. He read the stories of failed Kalian generals and tragic campaigns. When an archivist finally asked why, Hale answered in his usual calm tone that a commander who ignored his enemy's history could never understand their heart. The archivist walked away in silence, uncertain whether to be impressed or unsettled. Meanwhile, Varela had responsibilities of her own. She attended council meetings, eased negotiations between delegates, and endured the sharp whispers of nobles who opposed the marriage. Some claimed humans could not be trusted. Others said Hale's calm behavior was an act, a mask hiding secret plans. Varela listened, but did not speak against them. She wanted peace, not arguments. However, she also noticed something changing in herself. Every time she heard someone insult Hale, she felt a small spark of discomfort. She did not fully understand why. She barely knew the man, but she sensed the nobles were wrong about him. One evening, after a long council meeting, Varela found Hale in the training courtyard. The sun had set, and the only light came from glowing blue lanterns and the reflection of stars off the white stone. Hale was alone, wearing simple training clothes and holding a long wooden staff. He moved fluidly, striking imaginary targets with controlled and practiced motions. Varela recognized the discipline. It was not the elegant fighting style of Kalian warriors, but something efficient and direct. Humans, she thought, did not waste movement. They fought to win, not to impress. She approached quietly, but Hale sensed her before she spoke. He set the staff aside and bowed with the respectful formality he always showed. Varela suddenly realized she did not know what to say. She had come without a reason, just following a quiet curiosity. "You train even after long days," she finally said. "It keeps the mind sharp," Hale replied. "And it reminds me that peace is never guaranteed." Varela understood the meaning behind his words. Hale was a soldier who lived with constant readiness. She wondered how many battles he had fought, how many comrades he had watched fall. She wanted to ask, but she had learned that humans sometimes carried wounds that were not visible. "Do you miss your world?" she asked instead. Hale looked up at the stars for a long moment before answering. "Humans adapt quickly," he said. "We learn to build lives wherever we must. But yes, there are people I left behind." Varela could hear the weight in his voice. That was when she realized that the marriage had required sacrifice from him as well. Humans lived short lives, compared to Kalians. Hale had given years that could not be returned. The next day, news spread through the palace that Hale would be attending military review with Kalian officers. Many expected it to be a disaster. Kalian officers had never respected human tactics. They believed their genetic strength and long warrior tradition made them the superior soldiers of the galaxy. Hale arrived at the briefing room, dressed in a simple Federation duty uniform. 12 Kalian military leaders stood waiting, wearing gleaming armor and expressions full of skepticism. General Rethar, a decorated war hero, opened the meeting. He displayed maps and intelligence about border patrol routes, stating that the Kalian Navy planned to increase patrol strength. After listening patiently, Hale asked one calm question. If the patrols were doubled, what counterplans existed if the enemy simply changed their approach tactics? The room fell silent. Rethar frowned, demanding what Hale meant. Hale explained a scenario in which a smaller force baited the new patrols away from strategic targets, leaving undefended gaps in the outer defense grid. One young officer laughed, saying humans always assumed the enemy would find a weakness. Hale looked at him with quiet seriousness and replied that, assuming otherwise, was the fastest way to lose territory. Some officers shifted uncomfortably. Rethar challenged Hale to suggest improvements. The human commander did. He proposed a rotating layered patrol and mobile surveillance nets that did not require heavier manpower, only smarter deployment. By the end of the session, the officers were no longer laughing. Some even nodded in cautious approval. Word of the meeting reached Varela quickly. She was surprised, though not entirely. Hale had spent weeks studying Kalian doctrine. He had not done it to impress anyone. He had done it because he believed peace required understanding, not ignorance. As days passed, the palace slowly began to change around him. Servants who once avoided conversation now asked Hale questions about Earth and human life. Young soldiers saluted him in hallways. They admired his composure and the way he spoke with respect rather than pride. Even the rigid palace guards softened toward him. Hale never tried to win hearts, but his actions did it anyway. However, not everyone accepted him. A group of nobles continued to meet in secret, convinced Hale posed a threat to Kalian power. They believed the marriage was a political deception, a strategy humans used to gain control. They whispered that Hale was too calm, too thoughtful, and too observant. It unsettled them. They were used to enemies who showed their intentions openly. Hale's quiet strength was harder to fight. Virella noticed the political tension but did not yet understand how dangerous it was. She was slowly beginning to see Hale as more than a diplomatic partner. She respected his intelligence, his humility, and the quiet firmness in his decisions. She saw how he carried burdens without complaint. Yet she also sensed that he was a man who, once pushed, would not remain calm. There was something in him that burned beneath the surface, something born from years of fighting and protecting others. She did not yet know that events were already moving toward a crisis. Outside the palace, forces who wanted the war to continue were preparing their next move. And soon, both Virella and the entire Imperium would see the true depth of human resolve when threatened. If you want Part 3 written in the same style and length, just let me know. Rumors moved through the Kalian capital like a cold wind. Whispers in narrow palace corridors spoke of secret meetings, missing officers, and coded messages traveling to unknown destinations. People tried to pretend everything was calm, but the tension in the air was real. Princess Virella felt it during council gatherings, where voices sounded nervous, and every sentence carried hidden meaning. She saw it when she walked through the palace halls and noticed guards speaking quietly, their eyes sharp with worry. Something was building, something dangerous. Commander Alexander Hale sensed it as well. He had spent too many years in military service not to recognize the signs. Servants avoiding eye contact, unexpected troop movements, doors that closed when he approached. The palace felt like a battlefield waiting to erupt. Hale did not know where the threat would come from, but he knew it was close. And like every other danger he had faced, he prepared, silently. Meanwhile, anti-human nobles became more desperate. They believed the peace treaty and the marriage were a mistake that would weaken Kale forever. In their view, the throne had allowed the enemy into their strongest fortress. They told themselves they were saving their people, even though their actions pushed the empire closer to disaster. These nobles worked with a military faction outside the capital, a faction that had grown bitter and angry after losing power in the peace agreement. Together, they planned a sudden strike to remove the royal family and destroy the peace treaty in one bold move. The crisis struck on a cold evening during a royal ceremony honoring the anniversary of the first Kalian fleet launch. Hundreds of officers, nobles, and guests gathered in the grand crystal hall. Music played softly. Golden banners hung from the ceiling, and tables filled with bright fruit and silver platters gave the event a warm glow. Virella stood beside Hale, greeting guests with polite smiles. Hale stayed stoic, watching the room with calm awareness. Even in a moment of celebration, he never stopped reading the environment. Then something small but significant happened. A young palace guard, usually composed and silent, entered the hall hurriedly. His face was pale, and his steps were uneven. Hale noticed him immediately. The guard moved straight toward the royal advisor and whispered urgently into his ear. The advisor's face drained of color. He looked at the king, then at Virella, and then he turned to speak, but he never got the chance. The palace shield lights flickered once, twice. Then, they went dark. Gasps and murmurs spread through the hall. The palace shields had never gone dark in living memory. Hale reacted instantly. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Virella and the hall entrance. The Kaelians around him were confused, looking at each other instead of the doors. Hale knew that confusion was the most dangerous moment in any crisis. He looked at the ceiling and listened. His instincts were correct. Moments later, the sound of distant explosions shook the marble floors. Enemy forces had breached the outer defenses. For a long second, most Kaelians stood frozen. They could not believe their own city, protected by the strongest military network in the Empire, was under attack. Hale did not have the luxury of disbelief. He turned to the nearest guard and spoke firmly but without panic. "Secure the princess and the royal family. Move now." The guard blinked, stunned, but Hale's tone snapped him back into focus. He nodded and signaled his squad. Hale then spoke to the second guard. "Find out which sectors were hit first. I need a map of the palace routes and power failures." The guard obeyed without argument. Kaelians valued strength, but in that moment, they realized clarity was strength too. Hale was the only one in the hall who looked like he had been expecting this. Virella stepped closer to him. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. "You think this is planned?" "Yes," Hale answered. This was timed. Someone inside helped them. Before she could ask more, the hall doors shook violently. Noble officers began shouting orders, telling guests to take cover. Others argued about who held command. Hale saw chaos rising. He stepped forward, grabbed a ceremonial spear from a display near the wall, and slammed the butt of the weapon onto the marble floor. The sound echoed throughout the hall like a thunderclap. Everyone stopped talking. Hale looked around the room and spoke with a voice that carried the weight of command. "Every second spent arguing gives the enemy time. The palace must be evacuated in controlled groups. The royal family leaves first. Officers who can lead will direct the rest." No one argued. Even Kaelian generals understood a simple truth. In a moment of crisis, the one who takes action is the one who holds authority. The hall doors finally opened, but instead of enemy soldiers, a wounded messenger rushed in. His armor was scorched, and his breathing unsteady. He reported that enemy forces had already taken several defense stations and were pushing toward the throne wing. They were using stolen access codes and precision tactics that only insiders would know. The realization spread through the hall like cold fire. Someone within the palace had betrayed them. Virella felt anger spark inside her. She had hoped the nobles who opposed the marriage would eventually accept peace. But now she saw that some would rather destroy their own empire than allow unity with humans. She looked at Hale and found him studying the messenger's report with calm intensity. He was already thinking ahead. "We need to move through the service halls," Hale said. "The attackers will expect defenders to use the main routes. Guards, form a defensive wing around the royals. Move now." Virella followed as Hale led them through a narrow doorway into the service passages. The hall behind them echoed with distant sounds of battle shouts, alarms, the hum of weapons charging. Palace officials hurried through the corridors, guiding citizens to shelters or safe rooms. The air smelled faintly of burning metal. Hale stayed at the front, checking every junction before continuing. He recognized areas that would become traps and signaled another route without hesitation. Kaelian guards, trained since childhood, realized quickly that they were following a commander who reacted faster than most of them could think. As they moved, Virella caught up to him. "How do you stay so calm?" Hale did not slow down. "I've seen what panic does to good people. Someone has to stay clear-headed." His voice was not proud. It was simply truthful. They reached a small control room where palace surveillance screens flickered with partial images. Hale moved directly to the console, studying the maps. Enemy forces had already secured several floors. They were moving in coordinated waves, cutting off exits and pushing deeper. Hale recognized the pattern instantly. It was a textbook infiltration assault. But something else troubled him. The attackers did not move toward the palace armory or the shield corps. Their main objective was the royal wing. This was not a coup to force negotiation. This was an attempt to remove the royal leadership entirely. If they succeeded, the empire would fall into civil war. Hale turned to the guards. We need to reach the secure bunker before they cut off the lower access tunnels. If they block that route, the palace will collapse from the inside. Virella watched the human commander issuing orders with precision. He had not been in Kale for long, yet he understood their palace defenses faster than many who had lived there their entire lives. She felt something shift in her heart, not fear, but realization. Hale was not just capable of leading troops, he was capable of saving nations, even those that were not his own. What she did not know was that the coming moments would show the Kalian people the true nature of humanity. When Hale fought, he did not fight for territory or glory. He fought for the lives placed in his care. And when the enemy pressed closer, the human husband she had married for peace would step forward with a determination that would change every mind that witnessed it. If you want part 4 inches the same style and length, just tell me. The palace that once stood as a symbol of Kalian pride now felt like a maze of danger. Distant alarms echoed through marble corridors, and the cold, dim lights flickered as if the building itself struggled to remain alive. Princess Virella moved quickly beside Commander Alexander Hale. Her heart beating fast, but her steps steady. The guards formed a protective formation around them, guided entirely by Hale's voice and gestures. Even without shouting, he controlled the situation with calm sharpness, the way a seasoned commander should. Enemy troops were advancing through the palace with surprising coordination. They moved in squads, sealing doors behind them, cutting communication points, and disabling scanners. Hale studied their patterns on the security screens whenever the group reached a small control room. It was impressive and terrifying. These attackers were not reckless rebels. They were trained soldiers who believed they were saving Kale by removing its leadership. They were determined, organized, and confident. But Hale had faced determination before. He knew how to answer it. As the group reached a side hallway that led toward the secure bunker, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from around the corner. Hale raised a hand, signaling everyone to stop. Kalian guards tightened their grips on their weapons and looked to him for direction. Hale pointed toward a side service storage room and motioned the group inside quietly. Virella entered, and the guards followed. Hale stayed near the door, listening. A squad of armored attackers marched past, speaking quietly among themselves. They did not expect resistance yet. They believed their infiltration was working perfectly. Hale waited until their steps faded into the distance. Then he motioned the group back out, moving again. The king's chief advisor approached Hale with a mixture of worry and disbelief. "How did you know they would come this way?" "Pattern recognition," Hale answered, without slowing. "They are cutting off the major routes first. They want us to move lower, where they can trap us." Kalian soldiers exchanged glances. Their own commanders had not yet understood the enemy's exact strategy, but Hale had read it within minutes. It was one more reminder that experience could be its own kind of weapon. They reached a stair access point leading downward. Hale went first, scanning the next level before signaling all clear. But as they descended, he noticed something on the walls, security screens showing the courtyard outside. Several enemy ships had landed directly on palace grounds. Kalian troops were fighting back, but their lines were thin. They had been caught by surprise. And many units had not even received orders yet. Hale made a silent decision. He guided the group through another hallway until they reached a reinforced door that led to a communications support center. The small room was filled with screens and long-range relay equipment. A single technician hid behind a console, startled when the group entered. Hale moved to the central console. The technician stared. "You're the human commander," he said, confused and nervous. "Yes," Hale replied calmly. I need an open relay to Palace Defense Network. The technician hesitated only a second before activating the system. Hale quickly scanned the tactical displays. He saw the positions of Kalian defenders, their scattered deployment, and enemy movements. Virella watched his eyes follow dozens of changing details, forming decisions in seconds. "You're planning something," she said, quietly. "Plans save lives," Hale answered. He sent instructions through the system. He didn't give emotional speeches, didn't claim authority, didn't demand obedience. He simply issued clear directives in efficient language. Kalian defenders, realizing someone finally had a workable strategy, listened. Units across the courtyard began repositioning, creating overlapping fields of defense. Other units, who were moments from being overwhelmed, received orders to fall back to safer ground instead of breaking entirely. Even from far away, these defenders began to feel hope. One Kalian guard watching Hale's actions whispered, "He is commanding our forces better than half our generals." But Hale did not pause to hear admiration. There was still a royal family to protect. He turned to the group. "We need to move. The attackers will notice the shift in defense and adjust." They left the communications room and resumed their descent. The hallways grew narrower, the lighting older and colder. These parts of the palace had not been used in many years. Virella realized that even though she was born in this place, she had never walked most of these corridors. Hale walked with focused confidence, reading the environment as if palace structure was a strategy map. But the enemy was also adapting. As the group reached another level, the sudden muted sound of a controlled explosive shook dust from the ceiling. Hale halted instantly. Moments later, automated lights flicked off, leaving only emergency strips on the walls. Enemy forces were sealing access routes. Hale pulled a portable scanner from a storage cabinet and checked the hallway ahead. The readings showed enemy presence 2 corridors away. They were moving fast and directly toward the group. "They're trying to intercept us," Hale said. He surveyed the hallway and noticed a maintenance chute that connected to the old transport rails beneath the palace. It was narrow, steep, and rarely used. Virella looked at the chute with surprise. "You intend to take us down there?" "It is the only route they haven't accounted for," Hale replied. The guards exchanged uncertain looks, but Virella understood. She nodded. Hale opened the hatch and motioned the royal family inside one by one. When Virella stepped through, she was struck by the realization that she was trusting Hale completely. Not because he wore the uniform of the Federation, not because he was her husband by treaty, but because she believed he would not let them fall. The chute led to an old rail maintenance area, with wide tracks stretching into darkness. Dim emergency lights cast long shadows across metal walkways. Hale scanned the area quickly. No enemy soldiers yet, but time was short. He guided the royal group toward a secondary tunnel that led directly to the lower bunker. As they moved, guards stayed alert, checking every corner. Hale kept listening for footsteps or distant movement, but instead he detected something else: static from a nearby communications panel. He stopped and activated it. The audio feed burst with voices Kalian troops in difficult engagements. Some were calling for reinforcements, others reporting strategic gains thanks to the earlier orders Hale had sent. The defenders were holding better now, but they needed leadership to coordinate their counteractions. Hale looked at the panel, then at Virella. "If I stay here and direct the defense, I can buy more time for the palace to recover. But someone must take the royal family the rest of the way." Virella felt a moment of conflict. She did not want to leave him in danger, but she knew he was right. The king stepped forward. "You have already done more for our people than we have done for you," the king said. Hale shook his head lightly. "This is not about one side or another. It is about saving lives. Thanks for watching. Well, thisworld.com. This for more merchants. Arredius poison day livers. One medit. World.com. He turned to one of the senior guards. You know the route. Lead them to safety. The guard bowed with sincere respect. For a brief moment, Virella and Hale stood facing each other. So much had changed in so little time. She saw in him a soldier who did not fight for glory, and certainly not for reward. He fought because he could not accept losing the innocent to the ambition of a few. You will be outnumbered, Virella warned quietly. Hale's expression did not change. Numbers only matter if you give them time. Then Virella witnessed something she had never seen before. Hale activated multiple palace consoles, calling up defense networks, emergency drones, and tactical overlays. To Kalian eyes, his hands moved almost too fast, calculating and directing 3 levels of battle at once. His voice flowed through command channels with calm instructions. Units shifted positions, reinforced weak points, and cut off enemy routes. Kalian soldiers, who moments ago believed the palace was lost, now found themselves pushing back. In a matter of minutes, Hale transformed a desperate situation into a coordinated counteraction. Some guards watched him in stunned silence. To them, he no longer looked like an ordinary human soldier. He looked like someone who could turn the tide of a war through sheer force of intelligence and determination. Virella was guided away by the guard, but she kept looking back at Hale until he disappeared behind the consoles. The sounds of distant battle continued, but something had changed inside her. She finally understood what humanity's greatest strength was. It was not technology, not numbers, not their short lives or adaptability. It was something deeper. When humans fought, they did so with everything they had and everything they were, holding nothing back. And as she was escorted through the lower corridors toward safety, she knew that the world above would soon witness that truth more clearly than ever before. If you want part 5 inches the same style and length, just say so. The lower corridors of the palace shook as distant battle continued above. Princess Virella and the royal guards moved quickly through the emergency tunnels, following the senior officer who led them. Although they were safe for the moment, Virella kept looking back, imagining Commander Alexander Hale standing alone inside the communication control room, coordinating defenses with tireless focus. She could not shake the feeling that everything now depended on him. Without Hale, the Kalian defenders would be scattered and the palace would fall. When the group reached the secure bunker, 2 guards scanned everyone and sealed the thick doors behind them. The interior of the bunker was small but strong, built to withstand heavy attack. The king sat down heavily, breathing out a long sigh. Advisors checked the screens, hoping to see positive updates. But the images showed the truth. Enemy forces were still pushing deeper into the palace. The situation was far from stable. Virella stood near the main screen, her eyes calm but filled with concern. She remembered Hale's last words before she left, that someone needed to take command and give the soldiers direction. And Hale had stayed behind without hesitation. She had seen many Kalian generals fight bravely, but Hale's sense of duty was something different. He had come from another world, another army. Yet he fought for the Kalian people, as if they were his own. Then, a faint voice came through the bunker speakers. A technician quickly adjusted the settings. The voice grew louder. It was Hale, giving orders over command channels. Everyone in the bunker stopped what they were doing and listened. Hale's voice was steady and controlled. He was ordering 1 battalion to regroup behind the defense towers, telling another squad to close off the western halls, and directing emergency drones to reinforce vulnerable areas. Virella leaned closer to the screen, watching the map change in real time. Red markers showing enemy positions were slowly being surrounded by blue markers representing Kalian defenders. The king stared at the screen in amazement. He is turning the battle around. No one in the bunker disagreed. Hale was doing what everyone else had failed to do, creating order out of chaos. His calm leadership traveled through the palace like a wave, giving soldiers direction and purpose. For the first time since the attack began, Kalian forces were no longer falling back. They were holding. But the enemy leaders realized what was happening. They understood that someone hidden inside the palace was coordinating the defenders. They changed their plan. Instead of pushing toward the royal chambers, several enemy squads turned toward the communication support systems. If they could silence Hale, the defensive lines would fall apart again. In the bunker, red enemy markers broke away from the central battlefield and began advancing toward the area where Hale was positioned. Virella saw this and felt cold worry rise in her chest. "They're going for him," she whispered. A high-ranking officer in the bunker turned to the king. "We must send soldiers to support him." The king grimaced. "We have no units here to send. All defenders are tied down holding key positions. If we pull them out, we risk losing everything." Virella felt helpless for several seconds, but then she closed her eyes and took a breath. She reminded herself that Hale was not alone. He had never fought alone. He fought with strategy first, strength second, and willpower always. At that moment, in the maintenance area above, Hale stood before the consoles, listening to the approaching sound of armored footsteps. The air smelled of heated metal and dust. The lights flickered again. Hale checked his remaining equipment: 2 emergency flash charges, a tracking pad, and a simple security baton he had taken earlier. Not ideal, but he had survived worse. He watched the tactical screens one last time, sending out several final orders. Distant Kalian soldiers received instructions on how to shift their positions so they could trap enemy units from behind. Through the communication channels, voices of gratitude and determination came back. Soldiers who had never met him followed his commands with trust. Then the hallway outside fell silent for a moment. Hale knew what that meant. The enemy squad was preparing to breach. He adjusted a control panel, shutting down one of the lights in the hallway to mislead them. A second later, the door exploded inward in a shower of sparks. Smoke filled the entrance. Enemy troops rushed in. Hale moved before they could adjust, using the darkness and debris to disrupt their formation. He did not strike with showy moves. He used precision and timing, knocking one weapon away and pushing another soldier off balance. In the dim, chaotic space, the attackers struggled to react. They expected a frightened diplomat. Instead, they had encountered a combat veteran who had survived too many battles to count. Hale used equipment panels and machines as obstacles, forcing the enemy to fight in close quarters where their numbers could not overwhelm him. The emergency flash charges he carried burst with blinding white light when activated, momentarily disorienting the attackers. In that brief window, Hale repositioned and continued fighting with controlled strikes and defensive movement. He was tired, but determination drove him forward. News of the struggle reached the bunker as blurred audio through the communication lines. Virella clenched her fists, listening to the muted noise of conflict. The king placed a hand on her shoulder, seeing the fear that she tried to hide. He spoke quietly. "He fights because he believes in something. That makes him more powerful than all the men who fight only for pride." Minutes passed. The tactical map updated again. More enemy units were marked as neutralized or captured. The Kalian defenders, now well coordinated, began pushing outward from the defense towers, slowly reclaiming ground. Reinforcements finally reached Hale's level and joined the fight, surrounding the last of the attackers. A wave of relief spread through the bunker. Then, suddenly, the speakers became quiet. Virella stepped forward quickly. "Why did communications stop?" The technician checked the panels. "There is heavy damage near the console area. We may have lost signal from that section." Virella's heart tightened. She did not wait for approval. She turned to the guard commander. "I am going back. He stayed for us. I will not stay hidden while he stands alone." The guard commander hesitated, but then bowed in respect. He signaled 6 soldiers to accompany her. The king watched with a mixture of worry and pride. Virella moved through the corridors again. following new, updated maps that showed secured pathways. When they reached the console chamber, the battle was over. Kalian defenders stood among fallen weapons and unconscious attackers. And near the center of the room, sitting on the floor and catching his breath, was Alexander Hale. His uniform was torn. There were bruises forming on his arms, and sweat covered his forehead. But he was alive. Virella rushed forward, but Hale raised a hand slightly, half-joking even in exhaustion. "I told you to go to the bunker." "You should know by now," Virella replied, "that Kalians do not leave their own behind." Hale managed a faint smile. The guards around them saluted him with full respect, not because he was the princess's husband, but because he had saved their home. Word of his actions spread quickly throughout the palace and then the wider capital. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the coup had been defeated, and the surviving conspirators were captured. The empire, shaken but still standing, began repairs. A council meeting was called, not to question Hale, but to thank him. Officers who once looked at him with suspicion now bowed when he passed. They had seen with their own eyes what a human could do when given a cause greater than himself. In the days that followed, the peace treaty was reinforced with new support. The Kalian people had witnessed the truth that humanity did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they refused to lose the people, places, and hopes that mattered to them. That kind of strength was difficult to defeat, and even harder not to respect. Virella stood beside Hale on the palace balcony, overlooking a city slowly returning to life. She had married him for peace, but now she stood with him for a different reason. She had learned what true strength looked like, not just in battle, but in heart. Hale placed a hand gently on the railing. "It's not over," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "But now we face the future together." The sun rose over KL, and for the first time in a century, the future looked brighter than the past. The galaxy had changed forever, and so had the hearts of those who witnessed a human fight not like a legend, but like someone who simply refused to give up. If you want a complete compiled version of all 5 parts together in one document, just tell me.